Staff, give us an overview of the bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The bill would establish the Fast Track Permits Act, sections 1 through 3 of the bill, with a stated aim to enhance economic growth and reduce regulatory burdens by streamlining the review process for local building permits. The bill would define key terms such as applicant, application, and complete application. Specifically, application would be defined to mean a request to the appropriate local governmental authority for a building permit or other required local governmental approval of an action related to the development of a single-family residential improvement upon real estate within the jurisdiction of such local governmental authority. The term would expressly not include appeals to a zoning board. The bill would require local governments to approve or deny applications and provide written notice of such decision within 60 days of receiving a complete application. If an application is incomplete, the local government would need to notify the applicant within 15 days, allowing them to submit missing information or make necessary modifications. If the local government does not notify the applicant within 15 days, the deadline of 60 days would apply starting from the date that the incomplete application was received. The bill would also allow for phased permitting in lieu of the 60-day decision requirement if agreed upon in writing by the applicant. If a local government fails to provide written notice of approval or denial within 60 days of receiving the application would be deemed approved. So to reiterate, the 60-day clock would start when the application is received by the local government, and it would end when either time runs out or when the government sends notice within that 60-day period. The bill would require local governments to state reasons for denial in writing and prohibit denial based on rules adopted after the application submission. Applicants would be allowed to resubmit applications without additional fees if initially denied due to not being complete. The date that the applicant completes the application by resubmitting it would constitute the date of receipt of the application. The bill concerning communication and deadlines, the bill would permit electronic signatures and specify methods for submitting the applications and notices by the local government. That would include mail, email, fax, and courier. Deadlines would include weekends, but exclude federal or state holidays. The bill would not supersede local rules that provide shorter decision or notice periods. The bill's deadlines would otherwise be in addition to existing requirements. Next, on page 4, section 4, this section 4, from what I can tell, it's separate from sections 1 through 3. It doesn't share the same definition section. And this makes some sense, I think, because it's dealing with a federally required permit that's issued by KDHE, not local governments, just for residential properties. So it's a different issue. The Federal Water Pollution Control Act, under the Clean Water Act, requires a permit to authorize people to discharge stormwater runoff from construction activities. The EPA has delegated the authority to issue those permits in Kansas to KDHE. The bill would require the Secretary of Health and Environment to issue decisions on those permits within 45 days of receiving a complete notice of intent, and states that the language shouldn't be construed to supersede conflicting federal law. Next, Section 5 amends KSA 12752, which pertains to the requirements for landowners to have a plat drawn for subdividing land or to dedicate land for public purposes. The applicable governing body would be required to determine if the plat conforms to subdivision regulations or whether to accept or refuse the land dedication within 60 days of the date of receipt by the secretary or clerk of that governing body. Otherwise, pursuant to Section 3, the plat or dedication would be deemed approved. House Bill 2088 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And with that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Senator Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hamilton, do we know if there are similar laws in other states that have these state deadlines on local governments?
That's not something that I could speak on the top of my head.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So am I seeing this right then? Within 60 days, the application would be deemed approved if the permit was not even looked over? Is that what that's saying there?
If the applicable governing body has not sent notice of approval or disapproval, it would be deemed approved.
So it wouldn't necessarily have been reviewed. Is that right? The project?
It would, the timeline for the 60 days would start when it's actually received by the governing entity. But then outside of that, they would have to send some kind of a reply or give notice of the application not being complete within that time period. Otherwise, yes, automatically it's deemed approved.
So I'm still not quite seeing if I'm getting the answer. So they could receive it but not review it. So are you saying that it would be automatically approved even if they didn't review it, although they received it and the time lapsed? Am I hearing that right?
Well, from what I understand in the language, I suppose that's one possible scenario.
Senator Cluse, I think that's, if you read fast track permitting, that's what we're talking about here. If they,
So no review at all?
no, they have 60 days to review it. If they don't review it, the city or the local authority would have 60 days to review it. If they don't review it within the 60 days, that's deemed, or some communication. That's what I read. That's the way I understand it.
Okay, I guess, Mr. Chairman, if I can, you receive it, they got it, but they didn't have time to review it, and then the 60 days is over, it's approved. So it can be approved without being reviewed. Is that what this bill is saying? Okay, that's all I need to know. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, Senator Blue.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I clarify. Realistically, though, it would be 75 days, right? You have 15 days to indicate that you've even received it, or if there's not enough documentation. And then at the end of that 15 days, then the 60 days begins. Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm happy to be corrected on that. I read it as being nested, where it's just the 60 days, but within that 60 days, they have 15 days
okay.
to notify the person that it's incomplete.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's where, within the 60, 15 first days to say you got it or don't have it. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Had an answer for Senator Titus's question about other states. Minnesota and Texas have similar laws. The timeframes are very similar in Minnesota and a little bit shorter in Texas. They have a 30-day limit, but Minnesota has very similar structure, 60 days with a 15-day period to decide whether an application is complete.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our first proponent is Mr. Andrew Weens on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Alley. Members of the committee, my name is Andrew Weens, speaking with you today on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project. And we're in favor of House Bill 2088, the Fast Track Permits Act. So I think the revisor did a great job explaining the bill. I don't need to go into a whole lot more detail. And you asked some good questions already. I think I'd just like to point out that Kansas families are feeling the impact of rising housing costs and delayed development. And one factor contributing to those challenges is permit bottlenecks at both the state and local levels of government. When permits take too long to process, home prices go up. Developers face costly delays and economic growth slows. So we think the Fast Track Permits Act is a common sense solution that ensures local governments process permits in a timely manner without overhauling existing permitting systems. So it does create that 60-day shot clock, if you will, for local governments to process those applications. I think to a previous question, I don't know why a local government wouldn't review an application that it receives in 60 days. It just kind of speeds that process up. And I think in many cases, local governments are already operating within this timeline. There's also a couple of features in the bill that I wanted to highlight for you. So the revisor talked about the phased permitting, and that is an option if maybe for a particularly complex permit application. If a developer and the local government agree that this is probably going to take longer than 60 days, the developer can agree in writing to be subject to phased permitting, and then the 60-day shot clock doesn't apply. In addition, if a local government, I suppose, feels like they don't have enough time to review the application and the developer doesn't want to agree to phase permitting for some reason, the local government could reject the permit application, on day 59 or what have you. Obviously, the intent of the bill is to speed up, timely processing of permits. So that's not necessarily the desired outcome to have a bunch of rejected permit applications, but that is an option available to local governments if necessary. So yeah, we think this will help improve development for single-family housing. Originally, the bill applied to multifamily housing and commercial and industrial applications. The House just decided to narrow the focus on single-family housing, which we think is a doable thing for local governments in Kansas. And as mentioned previously, and I think another conferee might mention this as well, but there are other states that have some kind of a fast-track permitting process in place. Texas was mentioned, Minnesota, Tennessee, North Carolina, Arkansas, Florida. And in my testimony, I include some links that you can review on your own time if you'd like. But there are other states that do this fast-track permitting process, and we'd encourage you to pass the bill. I'm happy to stand for questions whenever it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Yes, Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, thank you. I keep seeing a lot of Opportunity Solutions Project. Are you a Kansas resident?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure of that. Second, since this came from the House side, I'm assuming you got to see the opponent's testimony. Have you had a chance to look over it, and do you think that there's a way for compromise?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the question. So yeah, I got to hear opponent's testimony in the House and reviewed quite a bit of it. I also met with some folks representing certain local governments, and I do not want to speak on their behalf, and I'm certainly not implying that we've come to some kind of compromise, because that's not true, and I think you'll hear opponent testimony today, which would indicate otherwise. But we did try to make some reasonable changes to the bill to address some of their concerns. And I'm, again, not saying that we addressed all their concerns, and they'll tell you today they still have concerns, I believe. But one of the things we included in the bill that wasn't in the original bill was the phased permitting, to kind of allow that process to be put in place if a developer and the local government agree, hey, this is going to take longer than 60 days. I don't want the permit application to be rejected out of hand. And you got to start over, and that's not ideal for anyone. So then, they can do the written agreement to allow, or to make it so the shot clock doesn't apply. And then we also put in place the, and I'm probably going to get the section number wrong if I don't look, so if you'll allow me, new section 4. Some of the folks that I talked to said that, from local government, said that sometimes they're waiting on the state of Kansas, the Department of Health and Environment, and I'm not speaking for them either, to clarify, but sometimes they have to wait on KDHE to do the NOI process, the notice of intent process. So that's why we put in the 45-day NOI shot clock, if you will, on page 4, section 4. And again, not speaking for KDHE, but I believe most of those NOI processes, I guess, are handled within probably 30 days, and they could speak more to that. But I don't think that they have huge issues with that, and I'll let them speak to that. But we tried to make a few changes. We also, we removed industrial applications in the committee, and then on the House floor, they took out commercial and multifamily housing. So the scope of the bill has been narrowed significantly from what it was introduced as, and in an effort to compromise. And again, not saying that we got there, pulled off all the opponents, but I think we made progress in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is just kind of about the necessity of this bill, because, I represent 10 cities. My cities are awash in single-family residential development. I mean, if you go through Prairie Village, Mission Hills, Roland Park, Fairway, Westwood Hills, all those cities, ton of single-family residential development. And I've never heard from any of my cities about this. I've never heard from any constituents about this being a problem. I've never heard from any developers, builders, contractors, anybody of that nature that we really have this bottleneck that you described. And so, and I notice here today, we don't have any developers here. We don't have any contractors here. We don't have any builders here. So I'm just, what evidence do you really have that this is a problem in Kansas that is urgent enough that this legislature needs to be spending its time addressing it? Because I just have not seen any of that evidence other than that this is another one of these kind of out-of-state think tank bill mill type bills. I just haven't seen anything from you, and we don't have anybody here other than you who's saying that this is really a problem other than somebody from another think tank. I mean, where are the builders, where are the developers? I mean, they would usually be, if they were getting squeezed, they would be the first to scream. And I don't see any of them here, and they weren't here on the House side. So walk me through the problem.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the question, Senator. So I will say, we think one of the reasons for bringing this bill is the rising cost of homes in Kansas, and you all hear about that in lots of different ways. And you know, one of the tangentially related issues that you hear a lot about is the rising appraisal values and home prices going up and property taxes going up. We think that this bill could aid in reducing the price of home prices, or at least slowing the growth by improving development. Yeah, and I will say, like, I think the other states that have implemented similar iterations of this policy are a good place to look. And I included a link to a study from Florida that after they implemented the fast track permitting process, they saw an explosion of new development for homes. And Florida is seeing, you know, for other reasons, lots of population growth. So they needed to have something like this in place. Obviously, it'd be great if Kansas was seeing similar growth, but we think this bill could improve that. I will also say, I think, you know, if you look at it from the perspective of a developer, I think if they had issues with their local government and the local government's processing of permit applications and the speed with which they process them, there might be a little bit of a chilling effect on developers' willingness to speak out for fear of retaliation. And that's, you know, me speculating. But I think there could be legitimate reasons why people wouldn't want to come up in front of a committee and stand up and say, hey, I've got problems with my local government processing permits. So.
I don't know. I've talked to a lot of commercial developers, and I've never found them to be really the kind of shy, retiring type who would normally not be willing to tell me if they were having a problem. And again, I mean, this bill's going to deal with our appraisal problem. I mean, this bill's going to bring down property taxes. This bill's going to bring down home prices. It's not going to do any of those things. I mean, you sort of alluded to that, but I think that seems pretty far-fetched from what this bill does. So again, I just, without more, Mr. Chairman, I think, you know, I want to hear the rest of the testimony, but I'm struggling to see kind of where the there is for this bill. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond to that? Yeah. And Senator, I apologize. I didn't mean to imply that this bill will bring down property taxes. I just was bringing up the fact that you guys hear a lot about the cost of living, and that includes the cost of homes and property taxes and appraisal values on that. This bill isn't targeted to bring down property taxes. It's targeted to bring down the time that it takes to process permit applications at the local government level.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Testimony. Next proponent is Tanner Temple, Deputy Secretary, Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity.
Thank you, Chairman. Members of the committee, again, my name is Tanner Temple. I'm the Deputy State Director with Americans for Prosperity. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this bill, which requires local governments to decide on building permit applications within 60 days with an automatic approval if deadlines are missed, and amends existing statutes to align with the sped-up procedures. You know, I heard Senator Corson talk about where the need. I grew up in western Kansas, Garden City's where I grew up, and a lot of the houses we have right now just not keeping up with the population growth out there. So, you know, I think there is a need out there in western Kansas, and I'm sure some of my western Kansas folks would agree with that in some aspects. But, you know, moving along here, the shortage of available homes is driving up prices, making it harder for families to find affordable housing. Over the past 10 years, the U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency's house price index has increased by 71%. which tells us the permitting delays does increase the housing costs. Furthermore, this bill establishes a clear timeline for permit decisions, saving both homeowners and developers time and money and making housing more affordable. Again, we were talking about examples in other states. A couple examples in more depth. The Texas model sets a 30-day deadline for municipalities to approve or deny development. So again, if no decision is made within 30 days, the application is automatically approved. And, Texas population is much greater than ours and a lot bigger city masses, and they have a shorter timeline than what we're proposing on 60 days here. For the Florida example, Florida has the shot clock law as well. In the first year after this law was implemented, Florida saw a 30% increase in new building permits, which is, much higher than the national average. Fastening permitting processes will lower costs for developers, allowing them to build more homes at lower prices. These savings mean quicker timelines and fewer obstacles for businesses investing in Kansas. A growing housing market will attract new residents, businesses, and investments, boosting our economy and making Kansas a better place to live and work. This bill is not just about housing, it's about making Kansas competitive in the national economy. For those reasons, we urge the committee to pass this bill.
Questions? Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony today. I'm kind of go back what Senator Corson said. I'd like to have you kind of answer this. Do we have any idea how long it takes for a permit to get? They say, okay, you can go with it. Across the state or any cities or town. Do we have any information here in Kansas?
Again, I don't have any concrete showing the exact amount of time in the process. It could differ from larger population centers to the more rural counties like I experienced in Garden City. I don't want to speak and give you an exact timeline and exact where it was without, those facts in concrete.
And I appreciate that answer. I guess the question I was wanting to know, how much of a problem do we have here? That's kind of what I was getting at. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Senator Corson.
Yeah, I appreciate you answering that. I'm a Garden City Community College graduate, so I get it, and I want to have more housing there. We need more housing there. I'm the biggest supporter of anything we can do to get more housing there. But again, it seems like we don't have any evidence that the reason that we're not getting as much housing as we would like is because of the issues that this bill addresses. If you would come with some data that these permits in Garden City aren't getting approved and that's why we're not getting the kind of housing stock we need, I think I would be the first person to be very open to that. But again, without having that data, I do agree we have a housing shortage, but I'm just not sure that there's a match between cause and effect when we talk about this bill, because I don't see any evidence that the reason that we're having the housing shortage, the reason we're not able to build as fast as we would like is because these permits aren't getting approved within 60 days. But if you, again, have evidence of that, I'd be very open to it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to the opponents. First opponent is Mr. Spencer Duncan with the League of Municipalities. Spencer, welcome to committee.
Chair, thank you, committee. I'm going to try to do two things fairly quickly today. First, I'm going to put in front of you two amendments that, while we still may not like the bill, would make it much more manageable and workable with concerns that we have. And I'm going to try to put two issues in front of you that we have some concerns about. The first thing is this amendment one that we would suggest is it uses the term application in the bill. It doesn't specifically in some spaces say building permits, which is what this is intended to do. The problem is the interpretation of applications could be rezoning, special use permits, plats, other development approvals submitted by a planning commission and approved by a governing body. All of those are covered under other statutes that we're required to follow that have all these other pieces attached to them. So we believe that this amendment, we view it as technical. The goal here is to focus on permits, but we'd like the language to clarify that, just so there's never any confusion moving forward. The second amendment we would like is to just remove Section 5, which deals with platting. And the reason is platting law already has a 60-day time period. The difference is under this bill, that 60 days would start the minute you file it, whereas the current 60-day law is the first day that your planning commission has their meeting. Planning commissions meet once a month. So we envision a scenario in which the first week of the month, someone files it, my planning commission meets the fourth week of the month, we've all lost 30 days, and I don't think that's anyone's intent, but since platting law already covers that 60-day period, we don't see this as a harm because it's still going to move that 60-day process under the current statute. So we think those two amendments make this a better bill. And I'm going to tell you the two reasons we still have some concerns with it, but we would very much appreciate consideration of those. The two things we're really concerned about with this bill, first is flexibility. Right now, we have most cities that will go in and say, as you're designing this home or this structure, you can submit some early plans to us. And our staff will take a look at it and we'll come back to you and say, you're too close to the easement, or that's not where you want to run the sewer, or you should really consider that. And then they can go back and work with that engineer, developer, and it kind of helps them move through the process a little bit cheaper for those people designing the house, and it gets it moving, believe it or not, actually quicker through the process. That can't happen anymore under this bill. The minute they put that paperwork into City Hall, the 60-day period has started. So we just want to make sure that some of that flexibility isn't lost, and if everyone's fine with kind of that new relationship that may be created, we'll live with it. But we do see that as a change in how a lot of cities do business right now with builders throughout the state. The second thing, and I'll be honest, we're not entirely sure how this plays out. We've tried to figure it out is, once you make it a mandatory 60 days, we are concerned that you are removing some of the period of time that citizens have to issue their concerns, whether it's in front of your governing body or with your staff. Because let's say somebody's building a $1 million home in a $200,000 community and they have real concerns with that. As they come to you to express those concerns or even consider protest petitions, once that 60 days hits, we're done. It doesn't matter. All of that input is irrelevant. We've got to approve these. So we just want to put those, we don't know how that plays out, to be honest. We've tried to come up with those scenarios, but those are the other two concerns we've had as we've looked at it for just what I'd call on-the-ground operational issues we deal with in cities. So with that, Chairman, I'm always open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Spencer, I work in the construction industry, so I'm trying to understand one of your arguments on being able to review but not have it as the full application. Why would that not be allowed under this bill? I don't see how letting somebody review it, but it's not being fully submitted, how that even goes hand in hand in this situation.
We interpret it, and it's okay if we're wrong, but we interpret this as once that has started, once they've submitted half plans to us, they can come back and say that's the 60 days has started. We submitted these plans for you folks to start taking a look at, and if we give them notes back, does that fall within the 15-day review? I don't know the answer to that. That's why we're trying to work it out as we take a look at it. So we don't have this confusion when it becomes law.
Okay, well, I'd like to tighten that because that happens quite a bit. But then again, too, it would be deemed non-complete. So then it's that first 15 days in general. So the 60 days, you don't have that situation. So I'd be interested in making sure that's tighter, but I don't want to be in that situation where people are now scared to talk to the fire marshal, to talk to certain folks to make sure that things are done properly.
We don't think that's the intent of this. We understand that. Again, new law, new territory. It's our job to at least practically sit down and say, if this happens, how do we deal with it in City Hall if it's an issue?
Any other questions or comments? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Spencer. So Topeka,
Yes.
I think I've not had any complaints that I can think of in the last, I've lived here for 24 years now, about home builders not getting permitted fast enough. So have you had a lot of complaints? I mean, you live a few blocks away from me. Have you had more complaints than I have? We're both in government.
Let's be clear, no city gets it right all the time.
Oh, true.
We've seen some stuff
Oh, that is
right.
true, yes.
I will say, we do not have a list of home builders, and I spoke with the Home Builders Association about this bill, and I think, I will never speak for them. One of the reasons they're not here is because if you pass this, fine. If you don't, they don't view this as a problem statewide. Things are getting approved pretty quickly, especially on single-family residents within that 60-day period now. So it is not a concern we've had. We actually also we reached out to cities to say, give us your timelines. Like we want to know, because I don't want to stand in front of you folks and suddenly find out that half my cities are, 90, 100, 200 days or whatever that is. So we tried to do that research too. We have not heard a lot of concerns about it. And I think that's a conversation we did have with some of the proponents. Tell us where the problem spots are, and I'll be the first person who takes the stick to the cities and says, what are you doing? Let's fix this.
If I might. So so one of the associations that, not only yours, League of Municipalities, but, we have the Home Builders Association group that shows up here quite often, and this has not been the issue. So that's why I was just wondering, what is causing us so much concern that we're going to fast-track permits? Because there's also a safety issue involved in that as well, I think. So if it's automatically approved after 60 days and hasn't been able to go through the proper permitting, because
And we
you
do
all
appreciate the
couldn't
work
get
that
to
was done in talking with the proponents and legislators on the House side. Real safety concerns, particularly the larger projects, the commercial, the industrial, and that's why those were pulled out, because I think there was an understanding that, okay, we get that. It's a little easier when you're dealing with single-family residences.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Spencer, one of the things that I think you brought up and the timeline when it starts is in question. I think that's what you're saying. And if this home builder that's got a plan for, let's just say he's going to build a spec house, hey, here, I'd like to put it on this plot, and I'm going to bring you a preliminary plot plan. But the key word there is a preliminary plot plan. It's not the final. It's not the construction documents that you need to see. That timeline isn't started there. Is that what your interpretation is?
Our interpretation is we don't think the intent of this bill is to do that. What we see is just if there's a way to clarify that so that then someone says, well, I gave you that stuff 2 months ago, 60 days is over, and we can say, no, we thought that was the preliminary, you gave us half a plan, not the whole thing, right? Again, I don't think most people are gonna do that. The home builders wanna work with cities. Those are relationships we build, but we just don't want that. We don't wanna be back here with a trailer bill in a year or in a court fighting it out because we didn't think about it on the front end.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Senator Tyson. Excuse me.
I have a question not for Mr. Duncan, but in general, if that's with your leave, I'd like to ask and consent with Mr. Stiles, if I could ask about the health and environment permits, but I want everyone to.
Yes. So any further questions? So close. Thank you very much for being here. Okay. Please come forward and state your name.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators. I'm Tom Stiles. I'm Director for the Bureau of Water at Kansas Department of Health and Environment.
So I was just curious, I see you have there's a 45-day limit in here. I was just curious if you know your average turnaround time on a permit for residential.
Senator, when the language came forth, I asked staff, for 2024, we received 900 notices of intent. Of those, 40 exceeded 30 days, 6 exceeded 45 days. And we advise the construction, the projects to get their paperwork into us 60 days before they want to start moving dirt. As a general rule, they don't, but we also almost as Mr. Weens indicated, typically, if everything is lined up and we have all the information necessary, we turn that and provide that authorization within 30 days.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing none, yes. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sitting here and I apologize. I got here a little late and missed the first part of the discussion, but who has the concern? Where did the idea for this bill start? What's the problem that we're solving? I guess that's what and I apologize if that's already been.
The concern, I think, was the time it takes to get a permit for single family.
And yet, it almost never is over 60 days anyway, we just heard, so I'm confused.
Well, that may be here. I don't know what it is about the rest of the country or the state. Any other comments? Seeing none, we also have written opposition from 4. You have those in your packets, so you can review those. So any other comments or questions on HB 2088? Seeing none, well, in the hearing on HB 28, Committee, we do have a little time, and we did have, we did work House Bill 2092 yesterday, and also House Bill 2117 yesterday. And any discussion, or what's your wishes on those two bills? Okay, we'll start with 2092. Any comments or questions on 2092? Okay. Supervisors, you want to give us a brief overview of 2092?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2092 concerns professional employer organizations. Under the bill, registrations with the Secretary of State would automatically expire on October 15th following the issuance of the registration. The filing of a PEO's most recent financial statements would now be done when the PEO renews its registration. PEOs with insufficient working capital would be limited to providing surety in the form of a bond with a minimum value equal to the amount necessary to achieve positive working capital plus $100,000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Staff know, if I remember right, one of these was unanimous in the House and the other one was one vote, and I'm not sure which one it was. This one is unanimous. So it passed the House unanimous. Any comments or questions? Do we have a, yes, Senator Owens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion we pass out House Bill 2092 favorably, and due to its non-controversial nature, place it on the consent calendar.
Do we have a second? Second, Senator Ware. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to 2117. And could you give us a brief overview of 2117?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2117 would make various amendments to Chapter 17, which concerns corporations, and Chapter 56, which concerns partnerships. The bill would do three primary things. One, it modifies certain business filing and fee requirements for business trusts, foreign corporations, and limited partnerships. Two, it would authorize professional corporations or limited liability companies to participate in transactions under the Business Entity Transactions Act. And then three, it would remove a current open records exemption for certain information provided by registered agents.
Any questions? What is our, this passed, like I say, this only had one in opposition in the House. What is our wishes on 2117? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move that we pass out House Bill 2117 favorably for passage.
Okay. Would you consideration?
Oh, do you want this on the consent calendar with consideration of putting this on the consent calendar?
Got a second by Senator Owens. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are good. Thank you very much. I think everyone on the committee got a schedule of our events, what we'll do tomorrow. And if I think we're going to finish, I don't have my schedule there with me, but we do have that out, so we will be working those for tomorrow. So hearing on 2019 tomorrow, then we'll have, if we have time, previously heard on those bills. So if any other thing before the committee today? Seeing none, we're adjourned.